Rowan lived in a forgotten corner of the city. His flat was small, the kind where the ceiling leaked in the rain, and the paint peeled in silent flakes. The fridge hummed louder than it should, often holding little more than yesterday's bread and a jar of mustard. Rent reminders lay unopened on the kitchen table, red ink screaming overdue. But Rowan had something that kept him breathing: paint. Every night, when the city's noise softened and the streets grew thin with shadows, Rowan carried his battered satchel of brushes and cans of spray paint to the alleys no one cared about. Old walls, cracked and abandoned, became his canvas. Under the glow of flickering streetlights, he painted the things he couldn't say out loud. Bursts of color shaped into wings, faces of strangers who'd once smiled at him, poems written in bold strokes. To most people, it was graffiti. To Rowan, it was survival. By day, he was just another man hustling for day wages, hauling boxes at the docks, delivering food orders on his bicycle, sometimes sketching portraits in the park for coins. His hands were always tired, his clothes always worn, but at night, when his brush touched brick, he was free. There was a quiet ritual to it. He'd set down his satchel, pull on his paint-stained gloves, and slip in his cheap, wired earphones. Music poured into him, not the polished kind from radio stations, but the raw songs of indie bands he'd found online, the kind that spoke of heartbreak, hope, and defiance. The rhythm guided his strokes. The walls listened when no one else did. Children in the neighborhood sometimes called him the night artist. He never corrected them. It was better than the broke guy on the corner. Still, loneliness lingered. Rowan had no family left. His mother gone years ago. His father, a shadow who had walked out when he was 10. Friends drifted away when poverty clung too tight. Dreams of becoming a gallery artist had long been smothered by bills and rejection letters. He had submitted his work to exhibitions, only to get polite emails saying not the right fit, or worse, no reply at all. And yet, he painted. On this night, Rowan stood before a gray, crumbling wall at the edge of an abandoned car park. His hands moved in rhythm with the music, strokes alive with urgency. Tonight's piece was different. A woman with eyes closed, head tilted upward as if daring the world to see her. Her face wasn't anyone he knew, yet she carried every emotion he had buried: hope, defiance, sorrow, strength. The city lights blinked beyond the rooftops, and Rowan's shadow stretched long across the wall. Sweat trickled down his temple, but he didn't stop. This was his cathedral, his confession, his one place where life didn't feel so heavy. What Rowan didn't know was that while he painted in solitude, eyes had found him. Hidden across the street, inside the backseat of a sleek black car that had broken down unexpectedly, a young woman sat watching. She wasn't just anyone. She was Celine, daughter of one of the wealthiest families in the city. Dressed in silk, her heels resting carelessly on the car floor, she should have been somewhere far brighter than this forgotten street. But fate, with its curious hands, had pressed pause on her night. And in that pause, her eyes met Rowan's world for the first time. Celine Johnson had everything money could buy, and almost nothing her heart truly wanted. Her world was stitched together with silk gowns, diamond necklaces, and hotel lobbies that smelled of polished marble and imported roses. To the public, she was the perfect daughter of Charles Johnson, the man whose empire of luxury hotels stretched across continents. Magazines called her the Golden Heiress. Her photographs often splashed on glossy covers, her life painted as flawless. But behind the shimmer was a girl who often felt caged. Her father was strict, proud, and obsessed with appearances. Her mother, gentle but distant, had long ago traded dreams for social duties. Celine grew up under watchful eyes, tutors, bodyguards, reporters, everyone telling her who she should be, no one asking who she really was. At charity galas, she smiled until her cheeks hurt. At business dinners, she spoke softly, carefully. always aware of her father's sharp glance across the table. Her schedule was filled with piano lessons, etiquette classes, and public events she hadn't chosen. She lived in mansions, with chandeliers that glittered but never warmed her heart. The world envied her life. Celine envied anyone who felt free. Her escape was books. She devoured novels late into the night, hiding under the covers like a child, reading stories of ordinary people who laughed, loved, and stumbled without the weight of a billion-dollar name. And sometimes, when the loneliness was too heavy, she drove herself against her father's rules through the quieter parts of the city, windows down, searching for something real. That night, fate betrayed her carefully planned life. Her car, a sleek black sedan, had shuddered to a stop near a deserted street. The driver had rushed off to fetch a mechanic, leaving her waiting in the back seat. Annoyance should have been her first reaction. She had an event to attend early the next morning, people to impress, a role to play. But instead, Celine found her gaze pulled out the window. There, under the glow of a broken streetlight, a man was painting. She couldn't look away. His clothes were rough, his movements unpolished, yet there was a strange grace in the way his hands danced across the wall. His head tilted slightly as if listening to music only he could hear. The image blossoming on the brick wasn't graffiti to her eyes. It was alive, raw, and heartbreakingly beautiful. Celine leaned forward, her breath catching as the figure of a woman began to take shape under his brushstrokes. The woman in his painting looked free. And in that forgotten corner of the city, Celine felt something stir inside her chest, a longing she had never been able to name. She didn't know his name, she didn't know his story, but for the first time in a long while, she wanted to. Rowan's brush slowed. He could feel it before he saw it, that prickling weight of eyes on him. It wasn't unusual for passers-by to stop and stare. Some admired his work, others muttered insults about vandalism. But this felt different, steady, curious. He turned his head. Across the street, in the shadowed backseat of a sleek black car, a pair of eyes met his, wide, dark, and shining, with something he couldn't name. For a moment, the world shrank to that single gaze. Celine's breath caught. She hadn't expected him to look back. She had been watching silently, hidden by tinted glass, her heart thudding as if she were the one caught in the act. But now his eyes had found hers, and it felt like he had peeled back the thin veil she always hid behind. Rowan frowned slightly, lowering his brush. He was used to being invisible, the kind of man no one stopped for. Why was someone in a car that polished, someone who clearly didn't belong in this part of town, staring at him like he mattered? Before he could think, Celine pushed the car door open. The night air was cool against her skin as her heels clicked softly on the pavement. For a moment, she hesitated. What was she doing? She never approached strangers, especially not men painting walls in the middle of the night, but something stronger than caution urged her forward. Rowan straightened, wary. He wiped his hands on his paint-stained jeans, leaving streaks of color across the fabric. His hair was messy, his shirt smudged, and yet he held himself with a quiet defiance, as if he was daring the world to judge him. "You're painting," Celine said softly, her voice uncertain but clear. "It's beautiful." Rowan blinked. Compliments weren't new, but this one felt different. Her tone wasn't casual, like someone tossing out a word to be polite. She sounded moved, almost shaken. "Most people call it graffiti," he replied, his voice rough, carrying the tiredness of someone who had heard too many dismissals. Celine tilted her head, eyes still on the unfinished mural. "Then most people aren't really looking." Something flickered across Rowan's face. Surprise, maybe even gratitude, though he masked it quickly. "You don't seem like the type to wander these streets at night," he said. "And you don't seem like the type to waste talent on broken walls," she countered, her lips curving just slightly. They stood there, two strangers from worlds that had no business colliding, the silence between them heavy but not uncomfortable. Rowan studied her, the elegance in her posture, the softness in her eyes. the way she seemed too polished for this forgotten street. He couldn't guess her story, but he knew one thing: she didn't belong here. Still, she stayed. For the first time in years, Rowan felt seen. Not as the man struggling to make rent, not as the invisible worker hauling boxes by day and painting by night. She looked at him like his art mattered, like he mattered. Celine, on the other hand, felt something break open inside her, a crack in the perfect mask she wore every day. This stranger with paint-stained gloves had created something that felt more honest than all the luxury she had ever known. Neither of them said goodbye when her driver returned and called her back to the car. She slipped into the seat quietly, casting one last glance at him. Rowan watched the car pull away, its red taillights fading into the night. He didn't know her name. She didn't know his. But both carried something unspoken home with them, the strange, undeniable sense that their lives had just shifted. Celine couldn't sleep that night. The image of the man with paint on his hands stayed with her long after she returned to her glittering home. She lay in a room larger than most apartments, walls lined with art her father had purchased for millions. Yet none of those pieces touched her the way Rowan's mural had. His woman on the wall, eyes closed, head lifted, seemed freer than Celine had ever felt in her life. By morning, she should have forgotten. Harrises didn't spend their time thinking about street painters. She had charity luncheons to attend, a fashion magazine interview scheduled, and her father's voice still ringing in her ear. "Remember, Celine, you carry the family name. Don't embarrass us." But that night, she found herself in the back of her car again, instructing the driver to take the long way home. Her heart pounded when they turned onto the same quiet street. And there he was, Rowan, headphones in, brush moving, the world outside his reach. She stayed hidden, watching from the shadows. It became her secret ritual. Whenever she could, Celine found excuses to be in that part of the city. Sometimes she stepped out of the car, pretending to be just another curious passerby. Other times, she simply watched from a distance, her breath fogging the window as she memorized the way his hands moved, how his eyes lit up with every stroke of color. Rowan noticed. At first, he dismissed her as coincidence. People sometimes passed through, some even lingered. But she kept returning. The elegant woman who didn't belong in the broken parts of town. She asked small questions about his paints, about the meaning behind a piece. Her voice carried genuine wonder, not mockery. One evening, she lingered longer than usual. Rowan leaned back from his latest mural, a spray of colors forming wings that stretched across the wall, and turned to her. "You really don't have to stand here night after night," he said, his tone rough, as if unused to conversation. Celine smiled faintly. "Maybe I want to." "Most people don't," he muttered, picking up another can. "Well, I'm not most people," she replied softly, surprising even herself. Rowan paused, studying her. She was too composed, too graceful. Every detail, her clothes, her perfume, her careful way of speaking, whispered of a life far removed from his. She didn't look like someone who'd ever worried about rent or gone hungry, and yet, when she looked at his work, her eyes carried the same hunger he felt inside. That unsettled him. "You don't owe me compliments," he said finally. "This," he gestured at the wall. "It's nothing, just a way to stay alive." Celine's gaze lingered on the painted wings. "Funny, to me, it looks like a way to fly." The words silenced him. No one had ever spoken about his work like that. Not the children who cheered when he painted superheroes for them, not the strangers who passed by and snapped quick photos. Her voice carried weight, as if she understood what his art meant before he did. That night, when Celine finally left, Rowan found himself standing still long after the car's taillights disappeared. He couldn't explain it, the warmth her presence left behind, or the ache that followed once she was gone. And Celine, sitting quietly in the back seat, pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heartbeat race. She had been raised among chandeliers and champagne, but here, in a forgotten alley, She felt more alive than anywhere else. Neither admitted it yet, but both knew they were no longer strangers. Something was pulling them closer. Rowan wasn't naive. He had grown up around people who wore masks, friends who promised to stay but drifted away when life got messy, employers who smiled before cutting wages, strangers who tossed pity disguised as kindness. He could smell pretense a mile away. But Celine, she was different. Night after night, she returned. No silk gowns this time, just jeans, plain blouses, and a quiet determination to belong in his world. Slowly, their conversations stretched. Some nights, Rowan spoke about the city, how its brokenness both crushed him and inspired him. Celine found herself smiling, imagining the boy he must have been before life hardened him. Other nights, she talked, not about her wealth or her family, but about her love for books, about how she often felt like an actress in a play she had never auditioned for, reciting lines written by someone else. Rowan would listen quietly, his eyes softer than she expected, as if he understood even the words she didn't say. One evening, she surprised him with coffee in 2 paper cups from a shabby cafe down the street. Rowan raised an eyebrow. "You drink this?" he teased. She smirked. "What? You think I only drink champagne?" "Wouldn't be surprised," he muttered, but his lips curved into the faintest smile. And she laughed. A sound so light and unguarded that Rowan found himself staring longer than he should have. Their ritual grew. Sometimes she held the flashlight from her phone so he could see better. Other times, he'd hand her a brush, letting her fill in the smallest corner of his mural. Her strokes were clumsy, and she blushed at her mistakes, but Rowan didn't mind. It wasn't about the paint. It was about the rare warmth that bloomed when she stood beside him. One night, as the street fell quiet, Celine whispered, "Do you ever wish life was different?" Rowan paused, brush hovering midair. "Every day. But wishing doesn't change anything. That's why I paint. It's the closest thing I have to rewriting my world." Her chest tightened. No one in her world spoke like that. Honest, raw. "And you?" he asked. "Do you wish it was different?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Yes, more than I can say." Their eyes met, and in that moment, something fragile, yet undeniable passed between them. A thread tying 2 souls who had no business finding each other. For weeks, they built something neither dared to name. Their conversations felt more like confessions, pieces of themselves traded in the quiet hours of night. Rowan believed her when she said she envied freedom. Believed her when she admitted she felt trapped. Believed her when she laughed like she was discovering the sound for the first time. But everything shattered one afternoon inside a dim cafe. Rowan was hunched over his sketchbook, sipping bitter coffee, when the television above the counter flickered with the evening news. He wasn't paying attention until her face appeared. Celine. Not the girl in jeans who laughed over clumsy brushstrokes. Not the one who whispered secrets like they were prayers. This Celine wore a gown of pale gold, diamonds at her throat, her hand resting lightly on the arm of Charles Johnson, one of the wealthiest men in the country. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted her name, and she smiled the way people trained for years to smile. Flawless, polished, untouchable. The caption beneath her image read, "Celine Johnson, heiress to the Johnson Empire, dazzles at charity gala." Rowan's stomach twisted. His Celine, the girl who longed for freedom, wasn't a passerby who had stumbled onto his world. She was her. A Johnson. A woman from castles and chandeliers, slipping into his shadows without ever telling him the truth. The coffee turned sour in his mouth. Betrayal burned in his chest. That night, when Celine appeared at the mural dressed simply as always, Rowan didn't greet her. He stood stiffly, brush in hand, eyes cold. "You're Celine Johnson," he said flatly. She froze. "You found out?" "Not from you," Rowan snapped. "From the news, from cameras, from the world that worships your last name. Did you enjoy it? Playing at being ordinary with me?" Her face paled. "Rowan, no. I didn't tell you because I wanted you to see me. Not the name, not the money, just me." He let out a bitter laugh. "You let me spill my life to you, my failures, my dreams, and you stood there, nodding like we were equals, while hiding half your life. Do you have any idea how small that makes me feel?" Her voice cracked. "I wasn't lying. Everything I told you was real. Every laugh, every word, it was me. You're a billionaire's daughter, the golden heiress, and you let me think you were just normal." "I never lied," Celine whispered. "I just didn't tell you." "Didn't tell me?" Rowan's jaw tightened. "You watched me struggle. You know I can barely keep a roof over my head. And you..." He broke off, shaking his head. "You live in castles, while I paint on broken walls." Her eyes glistened. "I didn't come to you as the daughter of anyone. I came because I saw something real in you, because your art made me feel alive." Rowan turned away, paint smearing across his palm as his grip tightened on the brush. "People like you don't stay. You come, you take what feels exciting, and then you leave when it gets too messy. That's what your world is built on. Appearances, masks." Celine's voice broke. "Maybe that's true, but you're the first person who's ever seen me without one." The silence stretched, heavy and sharp. Rowan's anger warred with the ache in his chest, the part of him that wanted to believe her. But belief was dangerous, and he had already been broken too many times. So he walked away, leaving his unfinished mural behind. Celine stood in the glow of the streetlight, her heart splintering. For the first time in her life, it wasn't her father's rules or society's whispers that suffocated her. It was the look in Rowan's eyes, disappointment sharper than any cage. For days, Rowan tried to bury himself in work. He painted but without rhythm. He delivered packages until his legs ached, worked late shifts at the docks until his hands bled. But no matter how hard he tried, Celine's face haunted him. Not the polished version from the gala, but the one who had stood in front of his mural, smiling softly like she belonged there. He told himself it didn't matter. She belonged to a world where paintings were auctioned for millions, not sprayed across broken bricks. She was an heiress. He was nobody. It was better this way. But the world had other plans. One evening, Rowan returned to the alley where he usually painted, only to find a crowd gathered. At first, he thought someone had tagged over his work, but when he pushed closer, his chest went cold. It wasn't the wall, it was him. Pasted across the bricks was a blown-up photograph, grainy, taken from a distance, but clear enough. It showed Celine standing beside him, her face lit with an unguarded smile as he painted. Someone had captured them together. By morning, the photo was everywhere. Online headlines screamed, "Heiress Celine Johnson spotted with unknown street painter, secret romance?" From castles to concrete walls, what is Celine hiding? Graffiti boy and the billionaire's daughter? Scandal or fairy tale? Rowan's phone, usually silent, buzzed non-stop. Some mocked him, some threatened him. Others offered money for his story. On the streets, neighbors stared, some snickering, some shaking their heads. And Celine, she was dragged into a storm she hadn't prepared for. Her father's fury shook the walls of their estate. What were you thinking, Celine? Being seen with someone like that? Do you understand what this does to our name? To our company? You've humiliated us. Charles Johnson thundered, pacing his study like a caged lion. The name I built dragged into the mud because of a nobody, a man who sprays walls in the dark. Celine stood tall, though her voice trembled. He's more than that. To you, perhaps, but to the world, he is nothing. And if you keep this up, Celine, you'll be nothing too. From now on, you will not see him. Do you hear me? Not a word, not a step, nothing. Her mother, quiet as ever, sat in the corner with downcast eyes. She didn't speak. She never did when her husband's voice roared, and Celine understood why. Silence was safer. But her own heart rebelled all the same. She tried to call Rowan, left message after message, her voice breaking in ways it never had before. I don't care who saw us, Rowan. I don't care about the headlines. I only care that I was with you. Please, don't let them take this away from me. Rowan listened to every word but never replied. He told himself it was to protect her. But each message cut him deeper, reminding him of the gulf between their worlds. The headlines weren't calling it love. They were calling it scandal. By the end of the week, he stopped painting. His satchel of brushes gathered dust. The walls stayed blank. He told himself it was mercy, but the emptiness inside him felt like punishment. And Celine, she had never felt her cage so tight. She had been trained to smile through whispers, to hold her chin high at galas, to survive under scrutiny. But this time, the whispers weren't about her dresses or her father's business. They were about the only person who had ever made her feel alive. And for the first time, she wasn't sure she could stay silent. The rain came heavy that night, drumming against the city like a warning. Rowan stood beneath the half-lit awning of an abandoned shop, hands shoved deep into his pockets, watching water wash the streets clean. Or maybe it was trying to wash him away, too. He hadn't painted in weeks. Every time he reached for his brushes, he heard the headlines again. He saw the mocking stares. He remembered Celine's father's voice, cold, sharp, warning him to stay away. Staying away was tearing him apart. But he couldn't ruin her life. He wouldn't. That was when Celine appeared, umbrella in hand. Damp from the storm. She must have searched for him. Her cheeks were flushed, hair clinging to her face, but her eyes burned with determination. "You've been avoiding me," she said, breathless but steady. Rowan looked away. "You shouldn't be here." "I had to be," her voice cracked. "You won't answer my calls. You won't reply to my messages. Rowan, I can't just disappear from you like that." His jaw tightened. "Celine, look at what's happening. The world isn't kind to people like me, and now they're tearing you apart because of me." "Let them," she whispered fiercely. "I don't care about the world." "You should," he snapped, louder than he meant. "You live in it. You carry your family's name. You've got palaces and spotlights and expectations I'll never understand. And me?" He laughed bitterly. "I paint on walls no one wants, sleep in a room the size of your closet, and pray my landlord gives me another week. You don't belong here." Her grip on the umbrella tightened. "Don't tell me where I belong. I'm the one who decides that." Rowan's throat ached. The rain blurred his vision, but he wouldn't let her see his weakness. "Celine, I can't give you what you deserve. I can't shield you from your father, from the press, from the way people look at us. If you stay with me, it'll break you. And I couldn't live with that." She stepped closer, voice trembling but unyielding. "You're wrong. The only thing breaking me right now is you pushing me away." For a moment, Rowan almost gave in, almost reached for her, almost admitted she was the only light left in his darkness. But fear won. Fear always won. "Go home, Celine. Forget this. Forget me." Her lips parted, trembling. "Rowan, please." His voice cracked, the plea barely audible. "Before I ruin you completely." The silence between them was heavier than the rain. Celine's eyes filled, but she refused to let the tears fall. Slowly, she lowered the umbrella, letting the storm soak her. Then, with quiet strength, she turned and walked away, her figure fading into the curtain of rain. Rowan stood frozen. Every step she took cut deeper. When she was gone, he sank against the wall, hollow and trembling. He told himself he had done the right thing, that this was mercy, that letting her go would save her. But mercy had never felt so much like cruelty. The scandal should have faded. Most stories did. But weeks later, Rowan's name still surfaced in headlines. Not for his art, but as the unknown painter who had dared to stand beside Celine Johnson. The gossip was cruel, the jokes sharper, and Rowan, staying silent, allowed the world to write the story without him. Celine, however, had reached her limit. Her father's lectures grew harsher by the day. Her mother urged patience, reminding her that storms passed if you stood still long enough. But Celine was done standing still. She hadn't seen Rowan since the rain-soaked night he'd pushed her away. His absence gnawed at her, not just because she missed him, but because she refused to let his silence be the end of them. If he wouldn't fight for himself, she would. So when the Johnson family prepared for their annual charity gala, the event of the season, where cameras would flash, reporters would swarm, and every influential figure in the city would gather, Celine made her choice. That evening, as chandeliers glimmered and champagne flowed, the ballroom buzzed with chatter. Guests expected the usual: speeches about philanthropy, photos of the family's perfect image. But Celine, standing at the edge of the stage, clutched a microphone with trembling hands. The crowd quieted. She took a breath. Her father's sharp gaze burned into her back, warning her. But for once, she didn't shrink. "I know many of you came tonight expecting the usual words," Celine began, her voice steady though her heart raced. "But I can't keep giving you rehearsed speeches. Tonight, I need to tell you the truth." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Cameras lifted. Celine's eyes swept over the sea of faces. "You've all read the headlines. You've all seen the pictures. They call it scandal. They call it foolishness. But what they call scandal, I call honesty. What they call foolishness, I call courage." The room stilled. "His name is Rowan," she continued, her voice growing firmer. "He's a painter. Not the kind you see in galleries, but the kind who turns forgotten walls into beauty. I met him by chance, and in his art, I saw something I had never found in all my years of privilege. Freedom, truth, life." Gasps echoed. Her father's hand tightened around his glass. "They say I'm tarnishing my name by being with him," Celine said, her throat tightening but her gaze unflinching. "But my name has never felt like mine anyway. For the first time, I'm choosing something for myself, and I choose him." Silence. Then, the click of dozens of cameras. The story had just rewritten itself, live. Across town, Rowan sat in the corner of his apartment, sketchbook unopened, television flickering with the gala coverage. He hadn't planned to watch, but something pulled him to the screen. And when Celine's face appeared, when her words poured out, his heart stopped. "I choose him." For the first time in weeks, Rowan couldn't breathe. Not from fear, but from the weight of someone fighting for him when he had only known abandonment. In that moment, the walls he had built around his heart cracked. Celine, drenched in the spotlight she once despised, had turned it into a shield for him. The world would mock, the tabloids would scream, her father would rage, but none of it mattered. Rowan's chest ached with something he hadn't dared to feel in years: hope. Rowan didn't wait until morning. By the time Celine's speech ended and the gala erupted into chaos, he was already running through the wet streets, paint-stained jacket clinging to him, breath ragged with something between fear and longing. For once, he didn't care about the stares or the headlines. He just needed to find her. Celine stood outside the hotel, trembling from what she had done. Cameras still flashed at the gates, reporters yelling her name, but she slipped away through a side exit, heels tapping against the pavement. For the first time in her life, she had no script, no plan, only the weight of choosing love over legacy. Celine. Her name broke through the night. She turned sharply. Rowan stood there, drenched, breathless, eyes burning with something raw. "You shouldn't have done that," he said. Her chest tightened, but before she could reply, he stepped closer. "You shouldn't have had to. I should have been the one standing beside you." His voice cracked. "Instead, I pushed you away. I let fear choke me, but I can't let you carry this alone." Her lips trembled. "Then don't. Stay. Be with me." And before the world could pull them apart again, Rowan pulled her into his arms. For the first time in weeks, his heart felt steady. The days after weren't easy. Her father still raged. The press still circled. But slowly, the noise dulled. People grew tired of mocking what didn't break. Because Celine no longer hid, and Rowan no longer ran. With her encouragement, Rowan painted again. Not in secret alleys, but in the open. Celine convinced a local community center to give him their biggest wall. And there, under the fading light of day, Rowan poured himself into a mural, wings unfurling across bricks, a woman lifting her head skyward, free at last. Children gathered, neighbors paused, strangers snapped photos. For the first time, Rowan's art didn't vanish into shadows. It lived in the daylight, claimed by a city that finally noticed him. When the mural was finished, Rowan stepped back, hands streaked in color, chest rising with something he hadn't felt in years: belonging. Celine stood at the edge of the crowd, her smile soft, her eyes proud. "You see," she said quietly when they were alone, "the world needs your art." But she wasn't done. 1 week later, she blindfolded him, laughing when he grumbled. "Just trust me," she whispered, guiding him down uneven steps and into a space that smelled faintly of dust and possibility. When she slipped the blindfold off, Rowan froze. He stood in a wide, sunlit room, tall windows glowing with afternoon light, walls bare and waiting, wooden floors creaking with history. Paint cans and easels were neatly stacked in one corner. A studio, his studio. Rowan's throat tightened. "Celine, what is this?" Her smile wavered, nervous now. "It's yours. An old warehouse the city was selling. I bought it. For you. For your art. For your future." He turned to her slowly, voice barely steady. "You gave me more than a studio. You gave me back my dream." Celine stepped closer, wiping a streak of paint from his cheek. "No, you gave it to yourself. I just opened the door." Rowan pulled her into his arms, holding her like he would never let go. For the first time, the weight he'd carried his whole life, of being invisible, unwanted, unworthy, began to lift. Months later, the studio's walls bloomed with color. Children came to learn. Strangers came to watch. Rowan painted with freedom, no longer hiding. And Celine, no longer the heiress trapped in her father's shadow, spent her days by his side, building something real, something theirs. One evening, as the sunset poured gold across the studio windows, Rowan looked at her and whispered, "I used to paint wings because I wanted to escape, but now I don't want to fly away anymore." Celine tilted her head, smiling softly. "Why not?" "Because I already found my home," he said, kissing her paint-stained hands. And in that moment, surrounded by color, laughter, and love, Rowan and Celine knew theirs was not a story of scandal, but of survival, courage, and the kind of love that makes broken walls beautiful. Rowan and Celine's journey wasn't perfect. It was messy, fragile, and fought for in the shadows of judgment. But in the end, they proved that love isn't about wealth or status. It's about the courage to choose each other when the world says you shouldn't. And maybe that's the lesson for us all. The walls life builds around us can be broken, if someone is brave enough to paint them with hope. If this story moved you, let me know in the comments. Would you have chosen love if it meant risking everything? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you never miss more stories that stir the heart and challenge the soul. Until next time, keep believing in the kind of love that makes broken walls beautiful.